I knew what it was like for no one to believe in me. I knew what it was like to get my butt kicked and get back up again. And I just worked really, really hard. And I get asked, and I have been asked often, how do you become a pro? And it's like it's a lot of different things. A lot of that is luck, it's favor, it's God's blessing, it's right time, right place, people believing in you. And I think that's one thing I definitely want to communicate early in this podcast is like, there's no such thing as a self-made man.
Welcome to the How Soccer Explains Leadership podcast, where we explore leadership principles through the lens of the beautiful game.
Welcome back to How Soccer Explains Leadership. Thanks again for being a part of the conversation. I'm Phil Dark, your host, and with me is my brother, my co-host, Paul Jobson. Paul, how you doing, man? It's been a while since we've done one of these.
It has. I mean, we've done some
Yes.
talks together that we've put on, but yeah, we haven't done an interview in a while. Yeah, just to be clear, because you mentioned it earlier, I'm not wearing a t-shirt. Not that it matters. I mean, but it is a sweater because it's cold here. Because you got to get your Waco weather update. Okay.
Yes,
It's going to be freezing temps tonight in Waco, which means we're going to shut the city down.
Yes.
For a couple of days. But
yeah,
no, man, it's good to be back on. I'm excited about our guest today, who's lighting up the video feed already.
Yeah,
it's a new awesome Zoom feature. It's been a while since I've been on Zoom, so
he's not going to be paying attention today. He's going to be playing with all the new Zoom features. So but it'll be a good one. No, man, things are good here in Waco town. Just starting off the new year here, getting back to school, getting back into the rhythms, sports. Really enjoyed the break of not running around all over the place. So kind of getting back into those rhythms is taking a bit of an adjustment, but looking forward to, really, it's nice to get back into some rhythms too. So it's been a good break, but ready to kind of get back at it, man. But are you guys doing all right out there on the West Coast?
Yeah, 100%. I totally get what you're talking about. Like we had an amazing 2 weeks. I just took off and enjoyed having my entire clan home. It was since the wedding that we were all home back in August, and had everyone home, including son-in-law, everyone for 2 weeks, and it was beautiful. It was a beautiful time. We did a ton of stuff together. We made a commitment to really do a lot of family outings. Went up to Tahoe, got to, do a hike in the snow, which was cool. Unfortunately, there's not a ton of snow, but it was great. Went to a movie, saw Mufasa, which I will say was a fantastic movie. But the soundtrack was not as good as the first one, I will say. Some people really like it, but I was not a big fan, but that's okay because the movie was great. But yeah, we just enjoyed time together. For those of you who don't have video on, Paul often will give a thumbs up to himself on accident with the floating thumbs up. And Wells Thompson, who is our guest today, already celebrated with the birthday hat floating through the screen. So if you're watching on YouTube, if you're not, you might want to go back and check that out on YouTube. If you are, you already have been celebrating with us because it is a Happy New Year and it is a great. I really am excited for 25, 24. We took about several months off from interviews. And that was because of the wedding. That was because of some family stuff. But it was a tough year. We talked about that on the recap show. So if you didn't listen to that recap show, if you didn't watch the highlights, I encourage you to go back and do that because the highlights from 24 were pretty awesome. I loved putting those clips together. And then our recap show.
This is a really good podcast, is what you're saying. Especially in 2024. This is a really good podcast.
All I'm saying is David Irby said that in one of the clips. So I'm not gonna say it. You said it.
I said it. I'll say it.
No, but it was a tough year, a great year all in one. And so I'm looking forward to 25, and I'm also looking forward to this interview because we do have Wells Thompson. You've heard a little bit from him already. Just the color commentary that he threw in there. But we got Wells with us, and we are recording this at the same time as the Chicago United Soccer Coaches Convention that none of us are at right now, but we are in warmer places. But the last time I got to connect with Wells was last year at the Anaheim Convention Center for the United Soccer Coaches Convention. That's the last time we connected in person anyway. And man, I've just loved every connection we've had, every time we've got to talk, every time we've got to hang out. It's a joy. And Wells, we're gonna learn about his story, where he came from. Played a lot of soccer in his day. He's also done some different things that we're gonna get into. But why don't we get right to it? Wells, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. It's actually the only time we met, and it was in the flesh, the human flesh.
Yes.
It was joyful. You guys encouraged me, and you do encourage me, and you've already encouraged me. I told the boys, Phil and Paul, off record that I feel like I'm 12. And they were like, me too. And I was like, God, that makes me feel so like it makes me feel good. So thank you. It's a joy and honor to be here. And you guys rock.
Yeah.
We
But Wells
are
and I have had a few conversations over the years, probably, through just interactions and introductions, and it's been awesome to get to know Wells in the early days. And I love the fact we've been able to stay connected, and it's cool to have you on the pod now, so we can dive deeper into so more people can get to know Wells Thompson as well.
Yeah, it
yeah.
took you guys long enough to get me on, but we're here. That's neither here nor there, you know?
Well, we
There's
had
a
to.
process. There's a
Yeah,
process.
it
There's a
is true.
long line of people waiting to get
That's
on the
true.
pod.
Yeah.
Very
So
true. Very true. We had to season this. My dad talked about seasoning the grill. We had to do that for a while before we were ready for
yeah, the
what
pod
Wells
wasn't ready for
Thompson. Yeah,
Wells.
that's exactly
That's what it
right.
was. It wasn't that,
That's
it's just
exactly
Oh,
we
right.
had to get up
Yeah,
to speed to make sure the pod was ready. And the
that's
pod is
exactly
ready. So
right.
let's dive
Let's
into
do it.
to this.
Let's
Let's
do
do
it.
it.
Okay,
Let's go.
so and this is why
do it.
people are wondering, like, who is this guy? Who is Wells Thompson? I know I've heard a little bit about. I know I've seen something, ESPN highlight something somewhere with this guy, but who is this guy? So why don't you briefly share your story for those of you who don't know the legend of Wells Thompson? Can you just briefly share your story, including how you developed your passion for soccer, for sports psychology, for leadership, and really how you
Yeah.
ended up. You did start soccer resilience with Brad Miller a few years ago. Just kind of tell that story. Tell kind of how you got your passion for all this stuff that you've done, and then we'll get to kind of what you're doing today in a few minutes.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad that you gave me a little bit of heads up and told me earlier that I was going to introduce myself because most time I would just start off with what I did in the past, and that was play a lot of soccer. But now I'm married to the love of my life. I've known her since kindergarten, no joke. She's my first kiss in fourth grade. I kissed her and I ran away. She broke up with me after that. This is a true story.
Love
We
it.
were friends and didn't seriously start dating until senior year of high school, but we have three young boys together, 10, 8, and 6. And, as far back as I can remember, one of my greatest dreams was I just wanted to be a dad. I have great parents and came from a great family and love me well. And I'm so thankful for that, and I wanted to live that out in my own life, and I'm doing that now. What you don't realize when you're dreaming about those things is just how damn hard it is. It is the greatest, hardest thing in the world, and I am fumbling my way through it now as a parent of three young boys, 10, 8, and 6. But I'll go back to the very beginning. I grew up in North Carolina, great family, as I said. I had an older brother. He's actually a big part of, so I played pro soccer. My older brother, I attribute a lot of my success to him, because every day after school looked like this. He'd come home, we'd play ping pong, basketball, soccer, tennis, you name it. He'd beat me. I'd chuck the ball at him. He'd beat me up. I'd cry. And I did that again and again and again. And I realized that in all those beatings, I learned a lot of lessons, and it actually served me as a kid growing up. And so I love sports growing up. I played everything: basketball, baseball, hockey, actually ice hockey, golf, tennis, swam. I was pretty good at everything, like naturally gifted, but soccer was my true love. And so the older I got, the more I just kind of focused on soccer. I was a wild kid. My mom says you was into everything, and so that got me into experimenting with drugs and alcohol at a very young age, 12. And so that quickly spiraled out of control. And so by the time I was 16 years old, I wasn't living at my parents' house, and my parents knew they had to intervene in my life to save my life, and they did. They saved my life. They tricked me to come home, and I came home, and my parents hired guys to kidnap me in the middle of the night. And so, interestingly enough, my mom's and my parents say the straw that broke the camel's back was when I told them I wanted to quit playing soccer. And this was like I was really gone. Like I was going to end up dead or in jail if my parents didn't intervene. Praise God that my parents had the resources to do something like this because, as you can imagine, it wasn't cheap. So guys kidnapped me in the middle of the night. I was 16 years old. They drove me 12 hours in the middle of Catskill Mountains from New York to the middle of Catskill Mountains in New York, and I spent a year and a half there. And it's one of the greatest things that ever happened to me. And I tell my story a lot, and I tell it from my perspective. Now being a parent, I can't imagine having to do that to my kids, you know? And I look at my kids now and I'm like, there's no way in hell you're ever going to be worse than me. Like, that's like one of the assurances I have. Like, you'll never be as big of an idiot as I was and am still at times. And so I'm thankful for that. But that's where God kind of opened my eyes to, hey, there's more to life than drinking and drugging. I came home when I was 18. I ended up shattering my collarbone in 7 places, repeated my senior year. I had a couple, I always wanted to play college soccer. So I had those dreams, right, as a little kid. And I came back home to North Carolina, went to a private school, and I grew up like 5 minutes from Wake Forest University. So I knew the coaches there. A couple of them actually coached my club team when I was younger. And so they invited me as a walk-on. And if you know college soccer, you know Wake's like, one of the premier teams in the country and has been for the last, whatever, 20, 25 years. And so, but Bobby Muse, who's the head coach there now, was the assistant coach at the time. And actually, Jay Vidovich, who's the head coach at Pitt, was the head coach at Wake. And Jay didn't really care for me. He didn't really value me. He didn't want me. But Bobby, I think, convinced him to kind of give me like a walk-on offer. And Bobby was just amazing, man, and loved me and believed in me. And I owe a lot of my success to him. And so I walked on to Wake. And I remember like my recruiting class was Ryan Solly, who just got done captaining the U17 team in Portugal. Like I'm kind of just his hometown scrub. Nobody really expected anything from me. And again, going back to the beatings, going back to the adversity in my life, it prepared me for going to Wake. I knew what it was like for no one to believe in me. I knew what it was like to get my butt kicked and get back up again. And, I just worked really, really hard. And, I get asked, and I have been asked often, how do you become a pro, And it's like, it's a lot of different things. A lot of that is luck. It's favor. It's God's blessing. It's right time, right place, people believing in you. And I think that's one thing I definitely want to communicate early in this podcast is like, there's no such thing as a self-made man. I didn't do it necessarily. Like I actually look back on my life and I'm like, you are such a dumbass, Wells. How did you get here? How are you still alive? How do you have kids? How are you married? Like if I told you stories about some of the things I did, you'd scratch your head and be like, oh my gosh. And so I just, it was God's grace. And a big part of my story, I grew up in a Christian home. I thought Jesus was not cool. I came to know Jesus as a junior in college, like radical, my freshman year spring break. I went to Cancun, read a lot of books, kidding, did a lot of stupid things. Went to Miami my sophomore year, and my junior year, I went on a mission trip to Dominican Republic, and God literally, like, I don't know how to explain what he did to me. He just changed me, and it was a slow process, and he's still changing me to this day. But I knew that, he was real, and I started to process what that meant for me, you know. And so I got drafted fifth overall in 2007. Kind of like I had a good career at Wake. But again, my friend Ryan Solly was a two-time All-American. My coach Jay Vidovich calls me into the office like 4 days before the draft and goes, "Hey, you need to go to Indianapolis." And I'm like, "What for?" And he's like, "The draft, you dingus." And so I flew up with my family, and Ryan Solly was there, and the guys that are going to get picked early in the draft are there. And I remember like yesterday, they open the room for the draft, and my dad gets the front row seat. And so I'm like, Dad, you idiot. But I'm looking back, I'm like, Dad, great job. I would have done the same thing, right? Why not get a front row seat, regardless of what happens? And so I'm sitting next to my best friend Ryan Solly, and I knew the Revolution liked me, and they traded up. They had the 11th pick, and they traded up to get the 5th pick, and I'm like, God, there goes my shot, man. And so they go 5th pick, midfielder from Wake Forest. Well, Ryan Solly was a midfielder from Wake Forest too, and he actually told me as after the fact, he was like, I started to stand up. And they called my name, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" It's so funny because with the other people, they had videos. They knew who was going to get picked. They just put my face up there. It was a picture because they didn't know I was going to get. And my dad describes we were like the Beverly Hillbillies. Like we knew who everybody else was, but nobody really knew who we were. And there was really the first time in my life that I went from like an underdog to like getting the recognition that maybe my parents or I thought I should have had earlier in my career. And so yeah, I knew that like that was my platform to honor God. And so I was drafted. I'm from North Carolina. I was drafted to Boston. Our very first interview, get to know Wells Thompson, and it was Jesus is my Lord and Savior in every question. Like, hey Wells, what's your favorite meal? Like Jesus is my Lord and Savior. I'm eat chicken. Like and I realized like when I got a little maturity in my faith, I didn't have to do that. But I'll never forget because the next day after that story was printed, our PR person came to me and she said, "You shouldn't talk like that, Wells. People up here won't like you." And in the South, it's cultural, right? Like everyone goes to church. Everyone follows Jesus, and it's just kind of what you do. And in Boston, they're like, no, that's not, you keep it to yourself. And so I remember, and at the time I would have said it was persecution. I know now that people get their heads cut off and set on fire, and that's persecution. It was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. It made me make my faith my own. I went and studied and read my Bible and started questioning, and I came to the conclusion that Jesus is who he says he is. So ended up playing at Boston for 3 years, had some success there, won a U.S. Open Cup, lost in the finals my rookie year in the MLS finals. Was traded to Colorado at the perfect time, 2010, won the MLS Cup in 2010, played there for about 3 years, traded to Chicago. Thought Denver was a big city, moved to Chicago, like it was crazy. Um, I had my worst year in my career in Chicago, and I was going to retire. Identity is a big thing for I think probably every human walking the face of the earth, but it's huge for me. And I was just always just a soccer guy, and so I just found my identity in it, and how I felt and how I saw myself, how I saw the world was dictated by whether I was playing, if I was playing good or bad. And I think that gets magnified the higher level that you climb. And it really led to my to soccer resilience and my purpose and passion behind soccer resilience, because as a pro, I struggled a lot. Dealt with a lot of identity issues, depression, anxiety, even some suicide ideation. And so really I was soccer resilience. I was trying to take that pain and turn it into purpose. I was going to retire after Chicago, end up felt like, I don't know if it was God called me back, or didn't want to get a real world job because the real world sucks. No kidding. But I went to the Charlotte Eagles, and they were a Christian soccer team, and I fell back in love with soccer. And I came back to Raleigh, North Carolina, which is where my family was, and my wife owns a business. And I was like, I'm going to be the local guy. I'm gonna play here for as long as I can. Well, I ended up getting hurt, and the team kind of screwed me over and had to hire a lawyer and go through workers' comp stuff. And so I retired and had 3 surgeries right away, and that was 9 years ago, maybe. And I feel like I've been transitioning for the last 9 years. We were just talking about skiing before we started recording, and the image that comes to mind for my last 10 years is like being in an avalanche. Don't know which way's up, and that's how I felt. Started having kids, obviously, which I read the parenting books before I had kids, and I told my brother he was doing it the wrong way. He was. That's not what the book said, and he would just laugh at me, and so I don't know. I think
Well, Wells, everybody is a parenting expert until you have kids,
yeah,
right? Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, yeah, I got a sales job and started having kids, and this and I started meeting all these Christians in the business world, the real world. And I was like, what? They never talked about their faith. And, I knew that like as a pro, like I leveraged that time to talk about Jesus and to love on other people and to get out there and stuff. And the funny thing is, as a pro athlete, I'd go around to schools and tell kids, like, don't put your identity in anything other than Jesus because it can be taken from you. And I didn't know what I didn't know, right? But my identity was fully in soccer. And I learned that when I got into the real world. But I came to the belief that outside of your immediate family, business or work is the greatest opportunity to change the world. You spend more time there than you do anywhere else in the world, right? More time than you do with your kids and wife. And so I was learning about the greatest transition of wealth in the history of the world, baby boomers retiring. And so I told my wife, I was in this sales job for like a year and a half, and it was December 2019. And I said, babe, as soon as you give me permission, because there's no doubt about it, my wife is the boss in every sense of the word. And I'm going to leave my job and go buy businesses and run them for the glory of God. And I'm like, I'm a white dude, pro athlete. Like, how often do I have to trust God? I don't know what really that means. And so I was going to take a big leap of faith and go buy businesses. So she gave me permission in January 2020. I left. I really didn't know what I was doing. COVID hit. I really didn't know what I was doing. And so I felt like it was divine orchestration. I got connected to my business partner, Soccer Zillions, Dr. Brad. Interestingly enough, through a podcast, because I was doing a podcast with a friend of mine that spoke to helping pro athletes transition to life after sport, because it's been so hard for me. And met Brad, and he had started Soccer Zillions before me, but wanted to take it to a different level. So I joined him. We ran that for 4 years, and I just recently left that. I started working for a childhood friend of mine in shipping containers, and I was selling them and running operations, and I loved it. I fell in love with it. I literally did, until I realized that he only cared about himself. And so I left that and am currently looking for work now and have no idea what I want to do and where God's leading me. And it's funny, I was thinking about this podcast. Like most people come to podcasts and like, let's learn from this guy. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know where I am. I'm in an avalanche. I don't know which way's up. I don't know what the heck I'm gonna do. Like, I just walked in the door from a meeting, and my son and and I was talking about this with my wife, and my son was like, before I got on the podcast, he was like, I just want to pray with you, Dad, which he's 10 years old, and he's like, I want to pray with you. I'm like, hell yeah. And he's like, oh God, please help Dad get a job. And so yeah, that's where we are today. Hopefully some of that made sense. My wife says sometimes when I talk, I don't make sense. So
Well,
hopefully
I think we're on the
that.
same page there. My buddy said that I was stubborn. I said that to my wife, and she goes, "Well, tell him that your wife thinks you're stubborn too." And I think all those things, right? Like I think we're probably very similar. I
Well,
have a feeling the little I know about
yeah.
you,
Well, I think
but
at the last 10 years of my life, the word to sum it up is I've been humbled.
yeah,
And apparently God says that's good for us. It really sucks to go through.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so, and you talk about faith journey, like I don't know why I thought this, but like I just used to think like your faith is just kind of an upward trajectory to the right, and it's a line, and man, it's a
yeah.
roller coaster,
It
and
is.
it's
Yeah.
yeah. So
We were talking about that before in the intro to this is just that 24, actually since really 20, it's a similar journey, different, obviously, but we've referred to it in my household as the holding pattern. We're circling the runway and it's hard and it's not
yeah,
fun. Now, in the midst of all of it, God's doing some amazing things and I'm seeing little glimpses of what he's doing. I know, but it stinks to not, especially when you played at a much higher level than I ever did, but to be competitive and you're like, I want to make stuff happen. I want to get stuff done, and let's
yeah,
go and let's do this and we're gonna go and let's roll and all these things are here, and then you're like, I'm circling the runway. I'm still
yeah,
circling the runway. And you're like, "Ugh." So no, and we're gonna get into some more of the stuff, but no doubt, and this is something I talk to people about all the time too, is we can whiteboard our life all we want, right? But the Bible says we make our plans and the Lord directs our steps, right? And so I've made a lot of whiteboards over the last 25 years, and I can tell you a sum total of zero of them have looked exactly as I drew it up,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so that's there's rest in that. Be still and know that I am God, and there is some really I could think of a lot of words I'm not going to say because
Yeah.
we're live, but it's no fun, right? It's not fun. It's not necessarily, you're not productive. And so all that to say, no doubt this is that wilderness journey that God is working in some awesome ways, preparing you for something that is awesome. And I can't wait to see what that is. And we're in that middle ground when you find that, when God shows that to you, we're gonna get you back on. We're gonna talk about that part of it too. But Paul, what are you thinking, man?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is, this is a podcast about leadership and how soccer explains leadership, and I don't know if there's, a lot better candidates to talk on this than Wells, just from
Yeah.
the experience that you've had. And I think one of the greatest attributes of leadership is vulnerability, right? And
Hmm.
I think that when we talk about true leadership, the leaders that are always boasting about how great they are, those aren't great leaders. And I think the
Hmm.
great leaders are the ones who can say, "Hey, I'm in a valley. This is where I'm at, but God's always been faithful, and I trust that He will be again. And I'm here for that journey." And that's what I love about any conversation I've ever had with you, Wells. You are an open book, man. You are wide open. I love
Yeah.
it. There's a lot to learn from that for sure, and I absolutely love that. And as you've been through, and you've had some awesome. And I say awesome because I'm learning about it, but like maybe not awesome as you're living through it, but some awesome, just very life-changing moments, right? But as you've gone through all of those things, I'm sure God has kind of put in front of you a why, and maybe your why has kind of changed over time or whatnot. But what would you say right now is your personal why? What do you think is kind of that life purpose right now?
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. I used to I say all the time, like, vulnerability is a superpower.
Yeah.
And it's easy to say. And I you know, I'm thinking back onto, like, how I introduced myself. And I actually said these words out loud the other day. I said, I feel like God's favor is not on me anymore. And I was talking to my wife, and then you know what came to mind? My kids and my wife.
Yeah.
My kids and my wife. And I'm like, oh my God, how do I miss that? How do I go through life going, God's favor's not on me? And I'm actually living the exact thing. Like, and so I think life is a lot about remembering and reminding each other of the true purpose of life. And I've done a lot of and thinking back to how I introduced myself, God is good, and I have a good life. And I think this is maybe what we get mixed up is, like, the tough things are the good things, and I don't know, we want to separate those things and compartmentalize everything. And um but there's a lot of good things going on in my life, and there's a lot of tough things, and that's the same for everybody. I think I say this often, and it's not encouraging, but I think the older you get, the harder life gets. It's like every year, talking about 2024, Phil, like, isn't every year freaking hard? And every year, it's almost like
Hmm.
harder than the last. And I'm like, man, am I that hard-headed or that idiotic that I have to make every year harder? And the verse that I was thinking about before the podcast was 2 Corinthians 12:9. His grace is sufficient, my power is perfect in weakness. And I'm like, man, that is I just left a meeting coming to this podcast today, and my wife was talking to me, and she said something about my son not liking school, and like, he's had a really hard time transitioning to school, and I'm like, man, I just feel lost. I just want to save my son, and I need a job. And I'm like, come on, God, come on. And I wouldn't know that verse, if I didn't go through all these things. And so I think, with the hard things comes appreciation, comes gratitude, comes perspective. And so, I think my why, and it is to share Jesus. There's life after this, and no one's going to remember Wells Thompson 100 years. Like, how sobering is that? How humbling is that? Like, I'm doing the exact same thing off the pitch that I did on the pitch. Is just trying to get to the highest level I can. I'm trying to please people. I'm trying to achieve, and I'm trying to gain. And you know, specifically, Paul, right now in this time in my life, it's to it's almost be a stay-at-home dad. My wife owns her own business and has for 13 years. And so that's left me to, I take the kids to school. I pick them up from school. When they're sick, I stay home with them. I do their homework with them. And that's really hard to, as a man, I think especially maybe, I don't know. Um, but you know what my wife tells me every day at the end of the day? Because my wife's the one, she's like, she's running her business, and so she's like, she didn't get home till like 8:30 last night. You know what she tells me every day when she gets home? Thank you so much for everything you did for our family. And
Mm.
I'm just sitting in my head going, you're such a loser, man. Get a job, like provide for your family. And so, right now specifically, like I'm trying to focus and it's hard, but just to raise my boys and share Jesus with them and be the best dad I can be. I know that at the end of my life, I know this, that I'll look back and go, thank you, Jesus, that I didn't have a job and I was able to spend more time with my kids. But
Mhm.
right now it's difficult and I want a job and I want to work and I want to make a name for myself. And yeah, all those things. And so my personal why, Paul, back to your question, I want to share Jesus. I want people to know Jesus. I want people to be in eternity with me. And I'm a sinner, man. Like I'm so jacked up. If you knew my thoughts and knew who I was, like you'd be like, who the heck is this guy? But I'm a sinner saved by grace. And at the end of the day, I think that, that's the point of life. We were created by God. I didn't make the rules. He made the rules. And I'm trying to accept that and live by that.
Love it. Great
That's
stuff.
so good. That's so
Here's the
good.
crazy thing. Here's a really crazy thing, guys. And I don't know how you do this, but I left my job to buy businesses and run them for Jesus, and essentially kind of started Soccer Resilience and left Jesus out of it. And Jesus was in
Mhm.
it kind of, but like, and that's probably, I don't know how deep you want to go into that, but yeah, and that's the faith journey, right? I'm trying to rationalize all these things I felt like I was trying to give everyone a freaking life hack. Like breathe your way through this. And I'm like, there's a great book out by Granger Smith, who's a top country artist called River. And in the book, he lost his son, and he says he was a self-help addict. He says you can't
Mm.
self-help through losing a child. And he also said that self-help teaches you that the problem is on the outside and the solution's inside of you. And the gospel teaches you that this problem's inside of you and the solution is outside of you. And that I'll never forget reading that book. And it was last summer, and it kind of blew up my mind. And yeah, so
As you're talking, you talked about the verse, in Corinthians, and I just was thinking about, the verse says, "When I'm weak, I am strong," right? And we growing up, I always thought, because everyone talked about it almost that I can remember, when I am weak, he is strong. But the verse actually says, "When I'm weak, I am strong," and it's like, man, that is, as a guy in America, that is so not what we learn,
yeah,
right? And it is so the opposite of what we learn. And going to what you're talking about, I totally get it. Like if we're not productive in how the world says productive works, we feel like failures. And that's what, honestly, that's what the enemy wants us to feel. And so to remember, when I'm weak, I'm strong. That's when God's going to do the most work for the kingdom. And it's an upside down thing. We don't get it. It doesn't make sense. And yet that's what we read. That's what we're told. And man, we need that grace of God to be able to get through it. We need that to be able to strength. We need that strength of the Lord, that can only come when
yeah.
we are weak, when we're in that
Well,
moment.
Wells Thompson today is, I don't know how much, 1,000 times more non-judgmental and forgiving. And maybe at this moment, like get me mad and then I'll go back to the other way. But like, just looking back through the struggle of like God's he's more concerned about our character, right, than our
Yeah.
comfort. And that's been lived out in his life.
But let's go back. Let's go into that a little bit more though. The soccer resilience thing,
Yeah.
because I know, obviously good things came out of it. Good things have
Oh,
come.
yeah.
Good things
Great
are
things.
coming
Yeah.
out of it, right? And so
Yep.
let's kind of get into that. You obviously start the business with Brad, who we've had on a couple times. Love Brad, right?
Love Brad.
And and not to say that the things that you're talking about are evil and bad. No, it's just it's a different starting point, right? It's a different mindset.
Yeah,
We talk about, right? So I'd love to hear that journey. Just,
yeah,
you started, you talked a little bit about starting with him, but you start doing some things. You kind of talked about the end part, but maybe even a little bit more into that. I'd love to hear that story because I think that's so important
yeah,
for people to hear from you who not only started it, but also have lived through the experience of going through the struggle as a
yeah,
player, as the literally the top of the game player, and
yeah.
how all that works together.
Yeah, I love Soccer Resilience. Ecclesiastes 3:1, there's a time for everything. And it just kind of happened. It really did just kind of happen. And the transition was very amicable. Diego Bocanegra, it's public now,
Mhm.
is taking over and it's great. Both me and Brad's heart was trying to turn our pain into purpose. Again,
Mhm.
so that's Second Corinthians 1:4. And I don't believe we go through things just for ourselves, but for other people as well. And the long and the short of it is Second Corinthians 1:4 says God comforts us in our struggles so that we can comfort other people. And so that's what I was trying to do. And Nelson Mandela stole my words. He said sports the greatest opportunity to change the world. And that's what me and Brad were trying to do. COVID was happening, Tokyo Olympics, a lot of mental health stuff. And Brad struggled with performance anxiety at Wake. And I struggled with that when I was a pro and even mentioned earlier, depression, anxiety, all those things. And so, just the question we asked everyone is, hey, how much of life, how much of performance stems from, the 12 inches or how many ever inches it is between your ears? And a lot of it, right? And the majority of people said 90% or more. And as a pro athlete, we didn't focus on this at all. And so I look back in my career going, man, I missed it. I could have been so much more free. I could have been so much better. I could have just enjoyed it so much more if I actually had some of these tools and practices and utilized them. And 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 I felt like it was divine orchestration. I felt called to do what I did at Soccer Zanes, and I believe we did great things, and I believe they'll continue to do great things. And I really believe that the it's tough, man. Youth sports is so tough. I never experienced these issues until I was a pro. And I think that's because until I was a pro was really when I just struggled with not playing, and like it was just so competitive, right? Like it wasn't like Wells is the best, and I hit those walls and I went through spells and period, and it was a business and it was different. It was just so different from being with my friends playing on a team and with my buds in the locker room experiences. And it was just a business. It was different, and I struggled with that, I think. And so, yeah, so, youth sports we thought was missing the boat. Everybody wants to spend money on the shiny new things, and they're missing the boat. And by not utilizing youth sport, well, 5% of college athletes play, or 5% of youth athletes play in college. 5%. What the hell are we doing with the 95%, right? And everybody
Mhm.
thinks their kid's going to go pro and this and that. And great, but really what is sports about? And read the whole Nelson Mandela quote. It's amazing. It's about teaching life lessons. It's about, I mean, Billy Graham said coaches will change more lives in a year than most people will in a lifetime. And it is so true. And we don't pay them enough. We don't educate them enough. It's just like teachers, right? And we don't pay them we don't pay them enough, and they don't get the respect that they deserve. And um, so yeah, I was just trying to leverage my platform, and we're leveraging our platforms to give back and to love on kids and to try to educate parents and players and coaches that, hey, man, this is a big part of the game. A lot. Can you remember the worst coach you've ever had in your life? I can. Can you remember the best coach, right? And that's why I say, like Bobby Muse, I was not a self-made man. I mean, I've had a tremendous people in my life that have believed in me, that go, man, you're acting like an idiot. You're better than that. And have carried me through, right? And I wouldn't be who I am today if I didn't have guys like Bobby Muse and Paul McDonough and Paul Forrester and my high school soccer coach, Chris Turner, who I still talk to this day. Like those are some of the most impactful people that we have in our lives, for the good and bad, right? I mean, a lot of coaches ruin kids' youth sport experience. And so, yeah, we were trying to change the world through the sport. And we did.
Yeah.
We did a lot of great things, and they will continue to do great things. It just happened. It was time for me to move on and figure. I don't know if anybody started a business if you listen to this podcast, but my wife just celebrated 13 years in business, and so I ran Soccer Zanes for 4 years. So 13 minus 4 is 9. I think I went to Wake, and so for the 9 years before I started Soccer Zanes, I'd hear my wife talk about business. I'd be like, "This is so easy. Just do this." It's like parenting,
Yeah.
right? It's just so
Yep.
easy. It is the hardest thing in the world. There's a million. I try to relate it a lot to becoming a pro athlete. I knew what I had to do to be a pro athlete. I had to eat, I had to sleep, I had to train hard, I had to, all those things. But in business, there's 12 billion things that you can do, and you have to figure out what are the 5 most important things and do them. And so it was extremely difficult. Look at the success rates of businesses that make it. And I found in Diego, a very capable, awesome guy of integrity and character who cares, that wanted to take over for Dr. Brad, and that's what they're doing. So I support them any way I can.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've had Diego on the show as well. He's a former guest. So you're right. He's done some great stuff. And if people have not heard the Diego interview, it was a good one. Somebody you can tell through his interview, his passion, for people, and purpose as well. So, Wells, I think a perspective that you could provide for a lot of our guests, because like you said, five and maybe somewhere around 5% of youth players go on to play in college, which means that even less go on to play professionally, right? And I think a lot of kids grow up thinking they're going to be a professional athlete in some sport, right? And the reality is, they're probably not. I have four. Odds are 0% of the kids in my household are going to be professional athletes. One might rise up. It's probably the baby, because like you, he's getting beat up by his 3 older brothers, and he might be the professional. He looks like Messi, walks like Messi, but I'm not. Anyway, well, to be determined. Episode 5,632 might be his interview, but we'll see. But give us a little perspective behind the scenes. Like what are some of the highs and lows of? You gave us kind of the ramp up to some of the highs and lows of becoming a professional. But what are some of the highs and lows of being a professional? And if you can try to mirror that to what the highs and lows were of the previous, the college time or the youth time. Because we're in the moments as a youth player, the highs and lows are severe, right? And then we get to college, the highs and lows are severe, but the youth ones seem a little bit more minimal, right? If that makes sense. And then you get to pro, I would imagine, I did not play professionally, that the highs and lows are even more extreme. And you look back at college and go, it's so bad. So kind of take us through what that kind of looks like, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Life is full of struggle, like we've talked about earlier, and highs and lows. And one of my favorite quotes is, which I'm so convicted of every single time I tell it, is, life is 10% what happens to you, 90%. What is the quote? Life is 10% what happens to you, and 90% is how you respond to
how you respond to it. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yep.
And I'm like yelling at my kids, and the quote's like coming through my mind, like, you control how you respond, Wells.
Paul and I
And
have never done that, and we've never responded
Yeah.
badly, so I don't
No.
know what you're
Mhm.
talking
I've never
about.
yelled at my kids
Yeah.
either.
Not as recent as even last night.
Yeah. As I have before I had kids, I'd say, I don't care what my kids do. I just want to be happy. It's a lie. I want my kids to be the best athletes in the world. And when I think about it, which is, it all translates to why it was so difficult for me to leave the game, is because soccer gave me everything. It gave me everything. People liked me because I played soccer. I was always picked first. I literally was probably always the best player until college. And then I was one of the best players. And then, as a pro, it's like you're just trying to figure it out. And so, I remember, like, as a kid, ODP was big, right? Olympic Development Program.
Yeah.
It's not like I didn't even get close to making it. Like, never made it past the second round. I don't even know if I made it past the first round. I remember getting those letters and crying and being like, "Oh, this sucks," right? And my friends are getting it, but I just played. I just kept playing, and I think, it's, as a young kid, maybe because our brains haven't developed as much, is like I just love to I just love to play. I didn't watch the game. I don't watch the game to this day. I watch one sport, that's MMA fighting. I'm obsessed with it. If you want to talk UFC, I'll talk to you all day, every day. Dustin Poirier, that's my shout out. I want to meet you and connect with you. Yeah, I
I'm
just
sure he
love.
listens to the pod. I'm sure he
I
listens to
bet
the
he
pod.
Yeah,
does.
yeah,
I
he's
just
Yeah.
he's commented several times. I mean, yeah. So
I
yeah.
just love to play, and I love to play, and I love to play and be physical, and that's kind of who I am. And I think that's a little bit of my difficulty transitioning to life. I always had an outlet, right? If I had a bad day, I could go slide tackle and kick someone's butt on the soccer field, right? I always took it out. And that's probably why I got so many red cards and yellow cards, right? But now it's like, how do I deal with that? So, I think they were just the highs and lows were just so much more extreme as a pro. And the pressure was a lot. It was a business. Um, I just, it was everything was just so much more magnified, and so, yeah, I don't know where I'm going with this, or if I'm answering that question the right way. I just think as a kid, I just loved to play the game, and I played the game. And yeah, did I have dreams of being a pro athlete? Yes. But like, it wasn't like today where kids, like my son's always like, he's like, I'm better than you, dad. And I'm like, you're not great. You're not good. It's like, I'm messy, and you watch these things, and we all think we're going to do this. And I don't know, but I just wanted to play, and I played, and I just wanted to play as long as I could and take it as far as I could. And I think my greatest asset was my determination, and my grit, and I just got after it. And I love to compete. And so anyway, but what I've realized is, as a parent now, my oldest son is not athletic. He's not athletic at all. And it is such a battle for me to take him to sports. Like, he scored one basket last season in basketball, and I was praying all season long that he would score one basket. And I'm like, I'm the best player, and I see how I gravitate to the best player in his team. I want to go up to the best player after his games and go, dude, freaking great game. You are amazing, you know? And I'm like, I have story after story after story of how I've failed my kids. Like my 5-year-old, my middle child, played basketball the first time, he cried. The whole first game didn't even go in. The second game, he went in and ran away from the ball. Well, you know what I did after the game? He's 5. After the game, I went in and I started in the car, and I started giving him advice of what to do next game. My wife looked at me and was like, "Are you serious right now? He just got in his first game. Like, shut up and say good job and move on." And I still struggle with that. And so, part of it is our perspective in society, how we treat sports, how we elevate sports. And yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm rambling
No,
now,
I
but
think I think I think
it's a
that's great.
challenge. It's not
Yeah.
easy for us as parents to
Mhm.
go, because we get so much of our identity from that. Like, like, I can only just imagine if my kid was great. Like, you know what I told my parents when I retired? I said, "You're welcome." Like, you're welcome. All you had to do was go to the game and just watch me kick everybody's butt and score 4 goals. Like, you're welcome. You know what I mean? Like, you didn't have to say anything or yell or be like, give me tips after. Like, I was so good already that you just had to be like, my son's the best. Everybody comes up and be like, hey, Wells had a great game today. Like,
Yeah.
I want people to do that to me, and it's like, it's
Right.
so ego driven, and it's so prideful, and it's so temporary, and it's so not what sports is about, but we get lost in it.
Yeah. I think that's a great point right there, Wells. I just want to pull that nugget out because I think
Yeah,
a
right.
lot of folks who listen to this are probably, whatever their other life has been, they're probably a parent of an athlete at some scale. And I think that's, you know, trying to get out of that mode of, are you trying to live vicariously through your child and their success, and how does that portray you as a parent, the success of an athlete? And what are things that are really important? Is you yelling from the sideline really helping them or not, right? Or what are you saying in the car after the game? What can really help them or not? And I think that's a great piece to kind of focus in, to even say, hey, some of the greatest athletes in the world, our professionals, struggle with that too. It's not just about, the guy or girl who always dreamed of being a successful athlete, never attained it, but hope their kid does. right? That's kind of what we portray as that crazy parent on the sideline that they never achieved anything, so they're trying to pull it out of their child. No, sometimes it's those of us who have had success in athletics as well who struggle with that too. It's a different side of the mirror, so to speak. But I think if we can all just kind of focus in a little bit on, what is actually happening in my child's head during this time. I think some of the greatest. There's a cartoon I think of like a kid yelling at a parent while he's at his job, like he's at his desk
Yeah.
working, and the kid's yelling at him from the side, telling him what to
Yeah.
do, and it's
Yep.
kind of like, okay, fair enough. So, but I think that's great. Phil, anything to add into that?
I mean, there's just so much here as we often do in our interviews. And I won't say we've done it every single interview, but most we could talk for hours and hours and hours about this stuff, and I have no doubt about that. And it wouldn't be boring. And I think it would be very productive. One of the things I've heard you say, and it's on this note, is yeah, it makes sense. Everyone will track with, yeah, don't be yelling at your kid to do whatever and to coach them from the sideline and blah blah blah. But I've also heard you say at one point, you don't that you think parents should stop cheering from the sidelines.
Me?
Um,
No,
I
I've
thought I
never said
saw it.
that.
I thought maybe it was a different thing.
Maybe
Maybe I
it,
misread
if
that
I
or
if
something.
I yeah, I mean, if I did say it, I was wrong and I was misspeaking because I definitely think you should cheer. I mean, I coach my middle son's soccer team and it's 4v4. And I mean, I see it all the time. It's
Yeah,
like boot it or kick it, or you're yelling at kids, and kids just you can't
yeah,
you can't. I don't know how we're supposed to teach the kids the game if we're just it's like a remote control. Hey, 2 steps to the
yeah,
left, John. 2 steps to the
Yeah.
left. Like they've got to figure it out. And so I've grown a lot in tremendously in my journey of that. My oldest son's basketball coach, I was like, he's not doing enough. Like maybe I knew I should have signed up to coach. And then I come to find out he played college basketball. And I'm like, oh yeah, respect now. You know what you're doing. And he's so good because he's teaching the kids the things that matter, right? Like
Mhm.
teamwork, supporting each other. He gets everybody involved. He's teaching them the fundamentals. I definitely believe that we should cheer. And so when I first started having kids, I was really hands off. My oldest son, I was like, I don't even want to like bring up sports. But I think sports are such a tremendous tool to teach life lessons
Mhm.
that I want them involved now. And so I think that's what a good coach does. They push or they help their kids or their players become more than they think they can become. And I think it's the same way as a parent, right? Like my oldest son, just struggles with confidence and stuff. And so a great way for him to gain more confidence is to work hard, right? Because that's really what we care about. It's not about how good or bad you are, right? It's about, what are you going to do when you do suck, right? Or what are you
Mhm.
going to do when hard times do come? And because they're going to come, right? And I think that's the perspective that I try to keep with my kids, and I lose focus all the time because my kids are involved in sports and I go to all these games and he struggles. And so it's a struggle for me, and we're processing through that. But no, parents cheer for your kids,
I
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I see it coaching in youth soccer is like it's usually a mom or a dad. And you know how many people that have told me in my life that they could have gone pro? I could have gone pro Wells, but this came up and I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. And maybe that was the case. And I'm not cooler because I went pro. I'm just but like it's just it's so small beans, and us as guys, we all think that we can do it, right? We all think that we're better than we are, and we all think we can fight, which we can't. But maybe that's just me because I watch UFC.
Well, to be
Yeah, I was
honest,
gonna
I could
say,
have gone. I could have gone pro too. I just didn't work hard enough.
yeah,
Honestly,
yeah.
that's just what it was. I just did not work hard enough. You know,
Yeah.
no,
I tell
that's
my kids I
ultimately
could have
what
gone
there's
pro
what you're
too.
saying. Like, I mean, you said at the
Yeah.
very beginning, like a lot of things have to go right. Some of it's luck. A lot of it's God being involved and that being your path that He wants for you. But I laugh at that. I've heard that so many times too. Like I could. I'm like, no, I don't think that's how it works, man.
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah. I also think too is I think people just say that. Like I think kids just say I want to be a pro athlete, but we don't really understand what that means.
Yeah.
Like it's not like playing with your friends in the backyard or playing with your youth club's team. And like when I think back to my soccer career, and I heard Tim Tebow the other day talking, and I'm just so challenged. He's just such an amazing guy, but he
Yeah.
says I want to be more known for saving kids, than I do for my football career. And I'm like, I don't live that way. I
Yeah.
don't. I want everyone to know that I played pro soccer, and I want everyone to like come up to me and be like, "Oh my God, this and that," and dote over me because of my pro soccer career. And I'm just so challenged by that. Like, I know when I think about it on my deathbed, I'm not going to ask to have my ring and shine it. I'm going to like I want people around me. And those are the things that I'm going to care about. And
Yeah.
so, I think it's hard. I'm trying to keep that perspective and then pass that perspective on to my kids. Cause at the end of the day, like being a pro athlete isn't that glamorous. Like you're away from your family, you're traveling, it's cutthroat, and so I'm 41 years old now looking for a job, and I'm competing against 41-year-olds that have 15 years in the workforce, you know what I mean, or 20 years in the
Yeah.
workforce. And so anyway, I just think that kids say that a lot of times and don't necessarily mean
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Well, it
Uh,
looks good from here. It looks good from here because we don't see everything behind the scenes. We see the
Yeah.
glamour, we see the
yeah.
great goals, we see the highlights, we see the accolades, we see the dollar bills for the elite athletes. But we don't see the hard work. We don't see the grind. We don't see, the contracts almost up. Are you about? Can you have success to keep your contract? It's a job. You mentioned it earlier.
Yeah.
Like it's a job. I have to earn the right to be on the team the next year.
Yeah. And Paul, and this is a leadership podcast, right? Like
Yep.
what makes me a leader? Because I'm a pro athlete. Why am I a
Right.
leader? And you see that, right? The best player, oh, they're the captain, they're the leader. And the greatest thing that was missing from all of my pro soccer team's locker room was a leader. Leadership. Like I definitely didn't understand leadership. And I think soccer resilience is a huge impetus for this because I actually started to study it, right? And maybe this is me caring about something more than soccer. I didn't understand what leadership was when I was a pro athlete, when I was in college, and so I think that's one of the greatest things that if kids are listening to this podcast or any of us for the sake of it is to learn leadership and to study great leaders and I mean we have so much access to, but I didn't know what leadership was. I didn't just and that's what when I got drafted, I was giving something I didn't ask for, and that was a microphone. And people wanted to know my opinions on things. I'm like, I don't know who the hell I am. I'm trying to figure this out. And why anyway, why do you care? You know what I mean? Like, and why do I get this platform? Because I'm a pro athlete. Well, I guess the world does that to us, but like just because they're pro doesn't mean I know a daggone thing, you know?
Yeah, for
Who was
sure.
it?
For sure.
Was it Charles Barkley back in the day? It was like, I'm not your mentor, or
Yeah.
I'm not your role model. Hey, I'm not your
Yeah.
role model. And people like were so mad at him for that. But I'm like, in reality, it's like that's truth, man. That guy should not be your role model. Not because it was him, but in general, the pro athletes. Like, why are we making pro athletes role models unless they're Tim Tebow, right? So anyway, go ahead,
Yeah,
Phil.
no, for sure. No, I mean, I was gonna say I could have been pro for sure if I was just better, had the right opportunity, and worked harder. Um, and I would have been the best. I mean, I could have been the best in the world if I was the best in the world. And I think, and I say that to my kids all the time. I'm like, you guys have no clue like what it takes. You're sitting here watching a movie, like you need to be out at the ball, kicking the ball against the wall. If you like, if you really wanted, and it's got to be because you want to do it. I
Yeah.
can't make you do anything. You got to want to do it. And I showed him that like the Jay Demerit story where he like crazy,
Yeah.
crazy. Right now, it's not always like that, but it's crazy. And in today's world, when everyone's seen with everything and doing this and doing that, it's crazy. And so I
Yeah.
think it can be crazy, and we can feed into that, or we can feed into what you said. And I love what you talked about with the leadership, because if you look at our 160 something episodes, there's very few top players. And it's because of what you're talking about. Most people who have just been in soccer their whole life have never learned leadership because it's not taught a lot, which is
Yeah.
why we do this show. Is not that we're the end all be all and the gurus, but it's we want to talk with people who are leaders and are leading in different things. And that's why I love hearing what you're talking about. Like you have learned more in leadership post pro soccer
Oh yeah.
than you ever learned during. And you just said it. I hope I'm not putting words in your mouth, and
No.
probably ever would have. Because it's not about that. It's about how do we win games. And that sometimes flies in the face of teaching leadership at the highest level, because sometimes you have a player who is toxic to a cohesive unit team and good culture, and they might be the best player on the field, but that's not what you're teaching. That's not what but you're going to keep them because they're going to help you win games.
Yeah.
And that it flies in the face of that leadership and making the tough decisions and doing these tough things. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Well, but
yeah.
Brad Miller would talk about it took him 5 years to get legit starts at Wake. And I'm going, oh my gosh, that is amazing, dude. That you continued to go to practice and be involved in the team and you didn't even play and you didn't pout or whine or leave the school. I wonder how long that would have taken me to do that. You know what I mean? And he's going
Right.
like, and he will talk about this. He'll go, I didn't really think about it until you said that. I'm going, man, I would like Ryan Swaim, Lemur Gonzalez. Have you ever heard of those guys?
Nope.
No, but you know what they did every single day? They kicked my butt in practice.
Yep.
Brian Swaim was the fittest. He used to beat me in the Cooper test by like 4 minutes. I don't even know if it's possible that you can do that, but he did it. I used to like dread going to practice, and I'm going, okay, who's a better leader, him or me? I mean, he got up every single day. He did the exact same things I did, but he wasn't rewarded by it, and he still
Mhm.
had a good attitude. And th those are the lessons that like we need to teach kids. You know what I mean? I mean, this day and age and NIL and transfer portal and all that stuff, like it's just it's never been more applicable than it is today. But yeah, man, I look at I'm like, Brad, that's amazing. That is you should be so proud of yourself for doing that, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But as we talked about, it's just what he did, right? And I can't remember if it was Shellis or Randy Waldron, but one of them, the question they asked the leadership team candidates was, can you be a leader on this team if you're not a starter?
Yeah.
And, because leadership has nothing to do with whether you're on the field.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, anyway,
That's
Yeah.
great.
Paul,
Yeah.
what do you got, man?
Yeah. Well, I think, this has been, I mean, Phil mentioned earlier, we could probably have a 5 hour podcast right now to go through everything and hit all these hot buttons, and probably an opportunity to have Wells back on another time to dive deeper, because Wells you've got some great insights, man. I love what you have to say about a lot of these things. I'd love to dive deeper another time. But as Phil says, sometimes, all good things must come to an end. We got to kind of wrap this a little bit, or people are going to have, hit pause on this for a week to try to get all the nuts and bolts out of it. But couple questions we have at the end of every podcast. Uh, what and this is an interesting one. Wells, I'm really interested in your perspective on this. How have you learned the lessons you learned directly from the game of soccer in parenting and in your marriage? In Phil's house, he says, retaliator gets the red, right? It's the red card. It's never the first person that commits the foul. It's the second. We have some things around our house. Anything in your house that translates into marriage and parenting?
It all does, man. And I think again, going back to what I said originally, we want to compartmentalize things, but again, I think most of our life takes place between our ears. It's how we process it. It's the things we say to ourselves. I mean, one of the things I always tell my kids is, "Hey, you can't control what happens to you, but you can always control how you respond to what happens to you." You know what I mean? And I look back on my career in soccer, and I'm sure that I remember coaches, taking me aside and going, Wells, you need to calm down. You need to like, stop yelling at the ref and getting stupid yellow cards. And you would see that when I played. I mean, they had a card accumulation in the MLS. If you got 5 yellow cards, you had to sit out a game. Well, I got like 8 one year and I had to sit out 2 games. And I look back and see just how it hurt me and hurt my career. And so just trying to teach those things to my kids as well as myself. My dad always tells me that, and I love it, that when one teaches, two learn. And I'm trying to teach my
Mhm.
kids, and I'm constantly learning and the things that I'm teaching them, I don't necessarily understand fully myself, but I'm learning them. Again, I think so much of it is your response to what happens to you. It's really your response. So much is out of our control. Are we going to see the good or are we going to see the bad? And so those are the things that, I'm constantly trying to teach my kids, gratitude, right? What are you focusing on? Like one of my heroes is Nick Vujicic. He doesn't have arms or legs. I look him up. He's such an amazing man. And he said, people ask me all the time how I can choose to be happy and without having arms or legs. And he goes, I have a choice. And so I try to teach my kids to look for the good. I try to see the good in them, and that's so hard as a parent, right? Like I yesterday I saw my middle son leading my youngest son, and I was like, "Great job for leading your youngest son, Kylan." And then I go, "Man, when was the last time I did that to my kids? I couldn't remember. It's been so long, you're always going, no, don't do this, don't do that, yada yada yada." And so, I mean, it's all applicable, man. It literally is. You're just going from one arena to the next arena, and I think God's got a purpose and a plan for all of us. And I'm trying to teach my kids, not to compare to other people and to their journeys. Who cares if you're not as good as this guy, right? Like it's about the journey and the process. And I'm trying to learn that myself, right? So it's all applicable, right?
Good
Like,
stuff.
yeah, and I'm so hard-headed. I got to learn those lessons over and over and over and over again. So I wish God would just let me get it. Come on.
Yep, yep. Well, you look at the disciples, and they didn't get it until after Jesus ascended. So, they lived with him for 3 years and they didn't get it.
Yeah.
So, um, but that's a whole different conversation for another day. All right. So, I'm I'm wondering on this last question if you have read anything recently, given the fact that you're a stay-at-home dad and you're probably ridiculously busy doing that. But what have you watched, read, or listened to that has most impacted your thinking on how soccer explains life and leadership?
Yeah, I've read, God, I'm thinking what I'm reading through now. First, I'm reading the Bible. I'm trying to make that. It's amazing to me how long I've been a Christian and how much I don't know my Bible, and so I try to read that every day. I'm reading a book about John Hanrahan. He was one of the greatest wrestlers at Penn State, who's a born again believer, drug addict. It's called Touched by an Angel, maybe. I'm reading another book called I think it's called Sacred Space. It's about God's timing and how to process things and how not to rush through life. Of course, listen to this podcast for sure. Number one thing I do is, but again, I'm always trying to constantly learn. I actually just signed up. I'm getting my real estate license, so I'm in the middle of that. Yeah, life just doesn't slow down. It gets busier and busier the older you get. But I read I think it's Main Street Millionaire. It's about buying businesses. So I'm interested in that stuff. But yeah, I'm always trying to learn. Which again, I wasn't as a kid. I didn't care about school. Like I just wanted to get through so I could play soccer, right? And so those are again lessons I'm trying to teach my kids. Like, man, I wish I could go back to school and be with my friends all day. You know what I mean? And just hang out and eat lunch and bet and cap and make up cool words to Sigma to say.
Well, one thing we know, Wells, you got Riz. All right. So I think that's two episodes in a row we have said Riz. So I'm going to try to work that into every episode.
I want to clarify.
Well, you just said Riz. You just said it again.
I didn't say it again. I said
you just said
Riz. I didn't say the word. No, I'm not going to say it.
Well, you said the word. You said Riz. I didn't say it. Anyway,
guys, readers are leaders. I don't think I read a full book till after college, but readers are leaders. Read. It's one of the greatest
Don't bring it up, Wells. It's a sore subject. 2024 was not a great readers or leaders for me. We digested that on the last. I'm a derelict, evidently.
We did.
But 2025 is a new year, and we're
right.
after it.
Yes. We did talk about that on if you're wondering what Paul is talking about and what we are talking about with all these weird words, go back to listen to the 2024 recap. But anyway, Wells, hey, so grateful for you, bro. I am encouraged by you, inspired by you, and and I know you are right now. You are doing the hardest job. we and it's most rewarding as well. You know, I know my wife, when I don't know how she did it most of the days, I'd come home and she was, you know, I'd get home and she'd go take a nap and she was exhausted. And so, dude, you are doing something that will have eternal value. And so keep at that, and look forward to hearing what God does do in the next little bit with you. And we're with you. And we will get you back on in the future. This was a lot of fun, but it also brought a ton of great wisdom. So thank you, bro.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you, Wells.
Absolutely. All right, folks. Well, hey, thank you for being a part of this. Thanks for sticking with us. Thank you for kicking off 2025 with us. I look forward to hearing feedback from everyone. If you have any thoughts, if you have people you want to be on, you'd love to hear on the show, send that to us. Send it to us, Phil@howsoccerexplainsleadership.com. You can also go check out what Warrior Way is doing, warriorwaysoccer.com, coachingthebiggergame.com if you want to learn about that program. As always, we hope that you are taking what you're learning from the show and you're using it to help you to be a better spouse, a better parent, a better coach, a better leader, better teacher, better in everything that you do. And continually remind yourself that soccer does explain life and leadership. Thanks a lot. Have a great couple weeks.